All right, Derrick, good morning. Happy Tuesday. How you doing here today?
Good morning. Happy Tuesday. I'm doing all right. We have a lot of an exciting week still ahead of us.
We do have an exciting week. We've had some excitement already. I'm not even going to waste any time. First of all, did you trade Newsmax yesterday?
I didn't trade Newsmax. It just really didn't pop on my radar. I traded that CoreWeave on Friday and made a few dollars on it. And by the time I even saw what was going on with Newsmax, to be totally honest, it was up at like $40, $60. And I was like, all right, I'm just not touching this thing at this point. This is one of those things where immediately after an IPO, it doesn't matter what the company's worth. Like, forget about that. This thing could go to $500, it could go to $700, or it could go right back down to $10. Your guess is as good as mine. The spreads on it are really wide. The borrows are super expensive. So it's honestly not something that I'm going to be involved in since I missed that opening move.
Yeah, it sounds to me like you did not feel like you had an edge, so you're opting to pass. I think that's the smart move. That's what I would do too. I don't know how many of these IPOs you've watched, but honestly, this reminded me a lot of the GoPro IPO and the Beyond Meat IPO, where both of those stocks were just crazy numbers for what the company was worth. So you're right about that. Momentum really kind of carried those trades there.
I remember that GoPro IPO very well, and if I remember correctly, that gave follow through for like a month plus or something like that. It might not even have been until the lockup expiration that the thing actually peaked out and started to come back down, which whenever you're dealing with these types of IPOs, I always like to make a calendar alert for those lockup expirations because see what it's doing as you're going into that lockup. If it's still high flying and going insane, a lot of times that might really begin to set up your real short. And then other times they overprice in the lockup or they sell it down so much into it that it actually becomes like a buy the event situation. So that's one to put in a calendar alert out 6 months or so.
Really, really good mention there. And I'm actually going to piggyback off of that. If you have Benzinga Pro, guess what? In our IPO calendar, we will give you that insider IPO lockup date. Very easy to follow along with. Love the tip of setting that there in your broker to alert you. Really good stuff there. Okay, did you have anything that you wanted to cover here on CoreWeave?
No, this was just a one and done for me unless it can get back up of 40. I think 40 is an important point for it technically. That and basically the all-time high of 42 is all I'm going to really pay attention to. This was an interesting one because I originally planned on shorting it. I was like, all right, they're going to give me like a $45 IPO price. It's super hyped. They're going to open it up at 65 on the secondary market. And that's something that I'm going to want to come in and borrow and short. And then they had so much difficulty getting this thing off the ground that I began to look at it on the other side. Oh, now we're going to only have a $40 IPO. We are reducing the flow. There's no hype around it at all. So I was like, this actually might end up being a little bit of like a quick day trade long. And it wasn't easy. They pulled that thing back quickly. There was some opening selling before they eventually got it back up of 40. And I was able to catch a little bit of a momentum trade. And then I just got out of the way when I saw that it gapped down to below 40 yesterday morning. I was like, all right, I'll put an alert out for that $40 area. If it gets up there, I'll look at it. But it just seems to me that the company is going to have to raise more money. So it's going to be dilutive at a certain point. They have a tremendous amount of revenue growth, and they've got some big backers. But I think that there are some difficulties underneath the surface with the company, and I'm not in a rush to be involved.
Okay, I'm with you on that too. I actually talked to my buddy who knows someone that is involved here in some capacity. He said investors were not happy here on CoreWeave. Chart really kind of shows the same thing. Folks, we are with Derrick Oldensmith from T3. Trade with Derrick for 5 full days for free in his ProDesk virtual trading floor, April 7th through April 11th. The QR code here is on the screen. We also put the link in the chat, so be sure to check that out. Okay, you didn't think you were coming on here without answering a question about tariffs, did you?
No, I didn't think so.
Okay, so let's just go ahead and get that out of here. How are you preparing for the tariff announcement? Is there anything that you're looking for? Individual stocks, concepts, sectors? How are you doing this?
Sure. So there's just so much uncertainty around this. A lot of the times these events will be like a sell the rumor, buy the news thing. I don't necessarily think that that's true here. We could see a little bit of a vol squash and a little bit of a bid. I think part of it depends on where we're trading, even kind of going into the announcement. And the way we've been moving these last several days, that's even hard to say, though I did think that yesterday morning's gap down was a good, at least shorter term tactical buy, because there's a day 4 gap down into some extreme extension, into some support. So I was coming in as a buyer yesterday. After yesterday's up move, though, it's a little bit tricky. So today I'm going to be pretty selective, pretty hands off while we wait for the tariff announcement to come. And again, there's a lot of uncertainty. Like some of the reports I'm even reading this morning make it sound like the White House doesn't even know exactly what they're going to be putting on yet. It seems to me like this is going to work in a few different stages. We're going to get the announcement tomorrow. Then we're going to see retaliation from our partners that we trade with. That's then going to lead to escalation. And then that will probably eventually lead to some sort of reconciliation or some sort of deal structure that maybe then is the real buy event. So it's difficult because as we come into the month of April, there's some bullish seasonality here. There could be an underlying bid to this market. I want to be bullish from that perspective of things. But then when I look at tariffs, it seems like tomorrow is just the end of the beginning. And what do tariffs do? Tariffs are inflationary and low growth by nature. And eventually that could trickle into the numbers. And we just don't know. If you could tell me 3 to 6 months from now exactly what the tariff front's going to look like, I could tell you how I want to position myself for it. But I don't think anybody has any idea what the tariff front's actually going to look like in 3 to 6 months from now. If this leads to some great deal structures where overall tariffs end up going down, we could be back to all-time highs. If this turns into a situation where we have 25 to 50% tariffs amongst everybody and that doesn't go away, we could be down 30% from all-time highs. We could be in a massive bear market, or we could be all the way back up. So it's certainly tricky. I'm kind of taking it day by day. Like I said, yesterday's a great example. You could be big picture bearish because you think that tariffs are terrible, but yesterday was still a great opportunity for a tactically bullish trade into that day 4 gap down as we're getting extremely extended. Then on the 4th 5-minute candle of the day, you got a perfect little hammer doji for a setup where you could have laid into some longs and caught the entirety of the intraday uptrend that we had. So it's a good trader's market because we're getting a lot of moves. But as far as the big picture goes of where we're going to actually end up with what these tariffs look like, their effect on both inflation and growth, and therefore the follow through to the market from a month or 2 months from now, it's just so difficult to say until we get more clarity.
Okay, that's spot on with that. I think that's a really good breakdown. And that actually leads into my next question, which is, I'm sure, what everyone is asking. Do you think that we trade better post April 2nd? Meaning, do you think that we get enough clarity on what's going to happen here for a majority of the uncertainty to be removed so that things trade better? Do you think that's possible, or do you think there's a longer runway before we get that certainty?
I think it's a longer runway before we get the certainty. I think it is very possible that we get enough tomorrow that it gives us at least some sort of shorter term relief and shorter term pop that could be like a couple day move higher that retraces a little bit of what happened at the end of last week. But I think that like I said, I think Scott Bessent himself said June. Look towards June to finally be able to get some clarity, because we're going to announce the tariffs, and then we got to get the reaction from Europe. We got to get the reaction from China, and now we've got South Korea, Japan, and China apparently all planning on giving us like a unified statement, which was really interesting to see that headline come out yesterday. And then we have to go through a whole negotiation thing. So this still could be a few months away before we get genuine clarity. And I would just look towards what the Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent himself said, which is look towards June to finally be able to get some real clarity. So I think what Charlie McElligott at Nomura is saying, which is this is the end of the beginning of tariffs, is the right way to think about it.
Okay. I think that's a really good breakdown there. Really well said. And that So let me just ask you then, you have any setups that you're kind of watching right now? I know you had said earlier that today might be more of just kind of a hands-off sit and watch day, which I completely understand. In fact, I wouldn't even be surprised if the majority of market participants felt the same way that you did. But are there any setups or individual issues that you're looking for or waiting for to maybe jump on when we do get any more information about all this stuff?
Yeah, I certainly have a few things that I'm looking at. So I do like the energy space right now. I like XLE. If you want to pull it up, it's developed some nice support. This XLE around 92. Chevron and ExxonMobil seem to be the real leaders in there. That Chevron chart, a little bit of an upside tail from yesterday, but overall that's flagging out. It looks really good. We're also kind of in the oil drilling space. If you look at VAL, Valaris, that thing had given a capitulation low in the beginning of March, and now it's been doing more of a consolidation here. I mean, if you believe in the concept of drill, baby, drill, this could be a real winner here. So I'm looking at this thing to maybe give continuation through $40 to $41. So I think that the energy space is an area where, if you remember in 2022, when we had a bear market, where did people put their money? They put their money into value, and energy is a value play. So I'm looking at XLE. I've got a position in Chevron. I have a position in BAL, just for full disclosure purposes. I do not have a position in ExxonMobil, but I like it as well. I still like the China trade. I have a position in Alibaba. I think you could look to be long versus yesterday's low. China is potentially going to continue to stimulate. The company has a massive buyback. It still trades at an extraordinarily cheap PE when you compare it to like any of its U.S. counterparts, and that's for a reason. Partially, there's just more risk when you're dealing with China equities, so it should trade at a little bit of a lower multiple, but it's pretty extreme. I think Baba's at like a 13 PE or something like that when you compare it to an Apple that's probably trading a little bit closer to like a 30 or maybe a little bit under 30 now that some of these names have pulled back a bit.
You're spot on, Baba, with a 13.07 PE going into today. Apple's PE 30.30 going into today. So you're spot on with both of those numbers there.
Yep. So I still like that trade. And if you look at that Alibaba chart, it's developing a nice base in that $30 area. They tried to get it below that yesterday. They defended it really well. They got it back above. So there's still some pretty good relative strength in that zone. What else? For today specifically, believe it or not, even though I'm not necessarily a huge fan of them, I have an eye on some of these quantum computing stocks. They seem to be showing relative strength in the pre-market today. I think that there was an announcement of a product from IonQ specifically, and I do have a position in IonQ. That's the one that I'm in, but it's set to gap up 3% right now, 3.6% when the market itself is gapping down. So there's some interest there. There's some relative strength. Maybe there's a trade in this thing kind of through yesterday's high, or if you look at like a QUBT, which I'm not in QUBT, this has also developed like clear like flatline resistance around $9 that might be worth putting an alert out for if that relative strength gives some follow through. We know that these names can run when they want to run. So if they decide to wake up, there could be some okay trades there. So I've got those on the radar for some, cute trades that might have a lower probability to the indexes while we wait for some bigger picture index clarity. And then honestly, the more that we're able to move higher, I'm pretty net long right now. I'm actually in 26 long positions. A lot of that stems from yesterday and getting heavier into yesterday's down move. But if we can bounce back a little bit further, I'm going to be quickly pairing out of those, and then maybe looking to put some shorts on. And in the short universe, like Tesla continues to be a go-to short for me. Palantir continues to kind of be a go-to short for me. Some of the most expensive stocks that are out there can give the biggest bounces, and I think that also tends to lead to good shorting opportunities when it comes together.
Okay, so you were just mentioning these stocks also being expensive. Is there a particular PE level that you're waiting for on some of these high flyers like Tesla or Palantir?
in order to buy them? Or?
Yeah, in order to maybe think that, hey, maybe alongside trade, because weren't you just saying that this is one of your better shorts? What would it take, I guess? What type of PE level or valuation metric would it take for you to change your stance on that to the long side?
So Tesla is just so expensive. I've done really well on this thing to the short side over the course of this calendar year. It's still trading at what, 140 PE, but now it's got less than 1% revenue growth per its 2024 numbers. And we're continuing to see, even this morning, just like the European car sales absolutely just implode. So they're not doing well in Europe. And Europe is a market right now where EV sales are expanding, but Tesla is actually the opposite. No one's buying them. In China, I don't think that they can compete. And in the US, I don't want to make it political. I never want to make it political, but I'm just going to make a kind of a blanket statement. When it comes to my friends and family, and I have friends and family who are on the left and who are on the right. The people I know who are on the right, they don't want to buy an electric car, and the people I know who are on the left, they don't want to buy a Tesla. So I don't know how Tesla can justify 140 PE with 1% revenue growth in 2024. That looks like it's getting even worse than that as we get into 2025. That's the fundamental thought process. This is a high beta stock. So I actually had called out a long through 240 in this thing a little bit over a week ago for a snapback to the $280 to $300 range. That trade worked out perfectly. And then next thing I knew, when it was getting into that 290 area, I actually started shorting it again for another quick trade. I'm out of that right now. But this is a one where you can tactically play both sides, because you will get really big bounces, even if it just continues the downtrend that it's currently in and works its way to a more appropriate multiple. But a more appropriate multiple might mean that Tesla's at $125. So, we'll see. It's obviously been able to.
Optimus robot, not a needle mover for you?
It's a pipe dream at this point.
I'm with you.
There's just going to be so much competition in the space. Maybe they become the winner, but who's to say? Everybody wants to do that.
Yeah.
And in robo-taxis, I don't think that they're winning. As a matter of fact, I think you could look at a pairs trade where you're long Uber, short Tesla, if you want to be a little bit more market neutral on it, to take advantage of some of the robo-taxi stuff with what Uber is doing with Waymo, and then still have the Tesla short because the company's expensive.
Uber here, by the way, a wonderful job yesterday defending that 200-day as it bounced off of that. That's pretty interesting. Uber, another one of the trades that is highly sought after here on this show. Folks, we are here with Derrick Oldensmith from T3. Trade with Derrick for 5 full days free in his Pro Desk virtual trading floor, April 7th through 11th. Okay, Derrick, anything else that you got for us before you get out of here? I know that you were just talking about oil. I absolutely love that. Right before you got on here, we were talking about the seasonality for oil being great, April being the best month, May being the second best month as it gears up for the summer there. So love the thesis on the oil trades there. You got anything else for us here on this Tuesday?
So we talked about China, we talked about oil, we talked about quantum maybe for a little bit of a trade. I want to see if AMD and NVIDIA can hold yesterday's low. I think that there could be a long in AMD and NVIDIA versus yesterday's low, but if they lose it because the market's selling, get out of the way, stop yourself out on those things. NVIDIA's starting to get a little cheap down here. It's becoming interesting, and they kind of held that support area around that 104. I was buying 104 yesterday, and then I'm all out of the trade already. And then AMD is interesting because AMD was in this big, brutal downtrend going back to October of 2024. And finally was able to break that in mid-March, despite general weakness in the market for March. And then it got hit with a downgrade last week that weakened it out a little bit, and the market pulled back in. But I'm curious to see if this AMD can actually give a little bit of a higher low, defend that $100 area, and work its way back up. So you might be able to look at both of them, but I would have a very tight stop loss, manage your risk. If they break yesterday's low, you just want to be out of the way on them and move on.
Okay, all of that sounds great. By the way, here on AMD, I preemptively drew a potential inverse head and shoulders just to see if this would set up. We'll see if we do get that chart formation here. Derrick, this was awesome. Great little rundown here. I know, exciting times that we probably haven't seen before. We'll see how tomorrow goes and then how long the runway is until we really get that clarity that you spoke about. Thanks so much for joining us here today. We'll check in with you next time, okay?
My pleasure. I'll look forward to seeing a lot of your subscribers here in my virtual trading floor for the free week that we're giving out. So see you next time.